What's up everyone, and welcome to True Crime in No Time, where we talk true crime in no time. So let's go ahead and get started with today's video, where we are talking about Dellen Millard. On the evening of May 6, 2013, Tim and Charlene Bosma were waiting for two men to arrive to come and test drive a truck that they were trying to sell online. The Bosmas were located in Ancaster, Ontario, which is located about an hour and a half outside of Toronto, which is where the men were coming from. They agreed that they were going to be meeting at the Bosma's house at 7 p.m. However, around 7:30 p.m., Tim ended up receiving a call from one of the men saying that they were going to be a little bit late. The men didn't end up arriving to the house until 9:20 p.m. and they were on foot. The Bosmas thought this was a little bit strange, but Tim ended up going on a little bit of a test drive with the men anyways, telling his wife that he would be home soon. It was a little while later when Charlene started to get a little bit weary and suspicious because Tim wasn't back yet, so she started texting and calling his cell phone, and there was no response, and she wasn't able to get through to him. She started to panic and she ended up calling the police. The Hamilton police started to search for Tim and the truck right away. On the same night, while the police were searching, they ended up finding Tim's cell phone about 20 minutes away in Brantford, Ontario, but there was no sign of the truck or Tim. The police were able to track the name of the men who drove off with Tim. However, the name was Lucas Bates. And when they tried to track the address that went along with Lucas Bates, it ended up going to a high school, and this high school had never heard of anyone named Lucas Bates. They didn't have anyone that worked there with that name. They didn't have any students there, and that's when the police realized that this was a burner phone. The police continued to look through Bates's phone, and they found a number for somebody named Igor. They ended up getting in contact with Igor, and he told them that somebody had contacted him to test drive a truck that he was trying to sell online a few days earlier. Igor was a little bit of a bigger person, and they believed that the perpetrator was originally going to attack Igor for the truck. However, because he was a little bit bigger, maybe the perpetrator was intimidated by this and they decided not to do it. Igor was able to give the police very good descriptions of the men who had come to test drive his truck. The police took this information and ended up going to the public for help. Within hours, the phone lines were ringing, and two people said that they think they knew who the suspect was. Dellen Millard was born on August 30th, 1985 in Etobicoke, Ontario, Canada. He is the son of Wayne Millard and Madeline Burns. Wayne was a pilot who worked both for Air Canada and Millard Air, which was an aviation firm who was actually founded by his father, Carl Millard. Millard grew up as an only child in a very wealthy household, and at the age of 14, he actually set the world record for the youngest Canadian to fly both a helicopter and an airplane solo on the same day. Millard owned several properties around Toronto, including a $1.2 million house in Etobicoke, a $500,000 condo, and a $2 million rental property, just to name a few. However, Millard's life was far from perfect. His parents ended up getting a divorce, which was really hard on him, and a few years before this incident ended up occurring, his father ended up actually passing away. The night of Millard's arrest, police surrounded his cars, guns drawn, and placed him under arrest. In Millard's pocket, there was $350 cash and 3 black latex plastic gloves. On his keychain were the keys to Tim Bosma's truck. Although police now had Millard in custody, it had been 5 days and they had no idea where Tim Bosma was. The Hamilton police was treating this case as a missing persons investigation with unusual circumstances. During their investigation, the police ended up searching Millard's mother's house, where they ended up finding Tim Bosma's truck. Inside, they found bullets, gun residue, and evidence that there was blood and a cleanup done. At this point, police had found Tim's cell phone, they had found his truck, but there was still no sign of Tim Bosma or the other person that was involved in this. Police were also searching one of Millard's other properties, which was farmland, when they ran into one of his neighbors named Chaz, who said that he would ride his ATV on Millard's property. However, he had never actually met Millard before. He did say that he had seen some kind of strange things on Millard's property, such as some heavy equipment like an excavator stuck in the middle of a swamp that he called a redneck smoker in the woods. Chaz took the police to this redneck smoker, which actually turned out to be a 6-foot tall, 10-foot long, connected to a 100-pound propane tank looking barbecue. On this massive thing, there was a metal tag that read "Small and Large Animal Cremators." So this isn't just a barbecue, it's a literal giant cremation device in the middle of the woods. Police checked inside and found that it was mostly empty, but there were some small teeth and bone fragments. But there was not enough to collect any DNA, unfortunately, but there was enough to prove that it was human and not animal DNA, or fragments, I should say. There was enough evidence at this point to prove that Millard had murdered Tim Bosma in this unthinkable contraption that he had on his property. The other man that ended up showing up to the Bosma household that night's name was Mark Smich. And again, I'm not really sorry if I mispronounced his name because he's a piece of garbage. I'm sorry, but not sorry. Opposed to Millard, Smich was born in 1987 and he grew up in a middle-class family. He had a police record involving things like drug possession, driving impaired, mischief, etc. Smich and Millard actually met in 2006 and were known to have a one-sided relationship where Smich was very into Millard and always trying to impress him and wanted to be his friend, where Millard just did not really care for Smich or really like him at all. However, by 2012, their relationship had completely changed. They were such good friends that Smich and his girlfriend were actually living in the basement of one of Millard's properties. This was around the same time when Millard and Smich started doing some missions together. They would steal things like construction equipment and lawnmowers and trees. Friends would describe these missions to be purely for fun, since Millard clearly had enough money to buy anything he wanted to and had absolutely no reason for actually doing any of this stuff. The investigation of the disappearance of Tim Bosma actually ended up opening up another investigation of a woman named Laura Babcock, who was ex-girlfriend slash friends with benefits with Millard. While searching Smich's residence, they ended up finding some of Babcock's personal belongings, such as her iPad and her duffel bag. Babcock was raised in a middle-class family and ended up going to U of T, which she graduated from. She ended up meeting Millard and they soon became friends with benefits. However, Millard did have another girlfriend at this time who was not too fond of Babcock and his relationship, and Babcock was not too fond of this ex-girlfriend as well. They did have some connection with each other and did talk a little bit, and it was never anything that was too nice. At one point, Millard's girlfriend did tell Millard that she wanted him to just get rid of her, so Millard said that he would take care of it. Babcock was last seen in July of 2012, and it honestly seemed like she had just disappeared into thin air. Smich and Millard both attempted to blame each other for the murder of Tim Bosma. Smich stating that he was in a completely different car when the murder actually happened, Millard stating that Smich was sitting in the back seat and he had pulled the gun on Bosma and shot him. The crowd had never definitively proved which man fired the gun, but it contended that both were in the truck and participated in the killing. On June 17th, 2016, both men were convicted of the first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison with no parole eligibility for 25 years. In December 2017, Millard and Smich were also convicted for the murder of Laura Babcock, again being sentenced to life with no parole to be served consecutively with the previous sentence, meaning that they were going to be spending at least 50 years in prison. Both of their whereabouts today are unknown, but they both are still in prison. And that is the story of Dellen Millard.